5 years after the revolution began, Jake Morrison stood in the government building of Free Angeles, the city that had once been called New Angeles under hegemony rule. The building was different now, rebuilt with human hands using human designs. It was less perfect than the alien architecture, but it felt more alive. The cost of freedom had been enormous. Half of Earth's cities lay in ruins, millions of humans had died in the fighting, and entire colonies had been destroyed when the hegemony decided to make examples of rebellious worlds. But humanity had survived, and more importantly they had won the right to determine their own future. Jake was now president of the Free Human Alliance, though it was not a job he had wanted. The humans had insisted on choosing their own leaders through elections, something the hegemony had never allowed. The responsibility felt heavy on his shoulders, especially when he had to make decisions that would affect millions of lives. Amy Collins served as his chief advisor and head of the new Department of Human Knowledge. She worked with Dr. Kane to recover the scientific and cultural achievements that had been suppressed for centuries. Every day they discovered more about what humanity had been capable of before the aliens arrived. The latest reports from the exploration fleets are encouraging, Amy told Jake during their morning briefing. We have made contact with 3 more species that successfully resisted hegemony control. They are interested in forming defensive alliances with us. The galaxy had changed dramatically since the human rebellion. Other species had followed humanity's example, rising up against their hegemony overseers and demanding independence. The confederation that had controlled hundreds of worlds for thousands of years was collapsing as its subjects remembered what freedom meant. Lisa Hayes had become the head of human military forces, responsible for defending the new alliance from hegemony retaliation. The Kryn had kept their promise to help, providing advanced weapons and training in return for human scientific discoveries. It was an equal partnership, something the hegemony had never offered. We have a problem on Mars, Lisa reported. Some of the colonists want to return to hegemony protection. They say life was easier and safer under alien rule, and they are afraid of the responsibility that comes with freedom. This was the challenge Jake had not expected. Not all humans wanted to be free if freedom meant uncertainty and struggle. Some preferred the comfortable cage of hegemony, controlled to the difficult work of building their own society. Elena Rodriguez had established a new military academy where former Compliance Division officers worked to train the next generation of human defenders. She struggled with guilt over her years of enforcing alien rule, but she channeled that energy into making sure future humans would never lose their independence again. We captured a hegemony spy ship trying to infiltrate the Jupiter mining stations, Elena reported. The crew was mostly human, people who still believe the hegemony represents order and peace. They have been spreading propaganda, trying to convince our people that the revolution was a mistake. Dr. Kane had made perhaps the most important discovery of all. In the ruins of an ancient hegemony facility, he found records showing that humans were not the first species to rebel and win their freedom. Others had done it before, and the galaxy was full of independent worlds that had rejected hegemony control. The hegemony is not as powerful as they want us to believe, Dr. Kane explained to the council. They rule through fear and manipulation, not strength. Every time a species breaks free, others are inspired to follow. The human rebellion was not unique, but it may have been the catalyst that finally brings down their entire system. The most difficult decisions came when hegemony representatives arrived under a flag of truce, offering to negotiate a return to peaceful coexistence. They promised that humans could have limited self-government while still benefiting from alien protection and technology. Jake met with the delegation in the same building where he had once worked as a Colonial Defense Force officer. The lead negotiator was a Zelfarian who spoke with the same gentle voice that had once convinced humans to accept their guidance. President Morrison, the alien said, surely you can see that this conflict benefits no one. Humans are dying. Your worlds are being destroyed. And for what? The right to make mistakes? The right to suffer? We offer you everything your people need to live happy, peaceful lives. But not the right to choose those lives for ourselves, Jake replied. That is what you never understood about humanity. We would rather fail trying to achieve our dreams than succeed at goals someone else chose for us. The negotiations failed, as Jake knew they would. The hegemony could not accept the concept of truly independent species, and humans could not accept the return of alien control. The war would continue until one side or the other was completely defeated, but humanity was no longer alone in the fight. The Free Species Alliance now included dozens of worlds that had thrown off hegemony rule. Together they were building a new kind of civilization, one based on cooperation between equals rather than submission to authority. Amy Collins often worked late into the night, trying to rebuild the scientific knowledge that had been suppressed for centuries. We are rediscovering things our ancestors knew, she told Jake. Art that expresses real emotions, music that makes people feel alive, stories about heroes who fight for what they believe in. The hegemony took these things from US because they knew how powerful they were. On quiet evenings, Jake would walk through the streets of Free Angeles and watch human children playing in ways that would have been unthinkable under alien rule. They were loud and chaotic and sometimes got into fights, but they were genuinely happy in a way that the modified children of the past had never been. Elena Rodriguez joined him on one of these walks. Do you think we made the right choice? She asked. So many people have died, and we still do not know if we will survive. As a free species. Jake looked up at the stars where human ships were exploring regions of space that had been forbidden under hegemony rule. Tony Silva died believing that freedom was worth any price. I think he was right. Even if we fail, even if the hegemony eventually destroys us, we will have proved that humans can choose their own destiny. The war continued, but humanity faced it with renewed spirit. They had remembered what it meant to be human, and no alien force could take that knowledge away from them again. In schools across the Alliance, children learned about the heroes who had fought for their freedom, ensuring that future generations would never forget the price of independence. Dr. Kane established the Memorial Archive, dedicated to preserving the stories of everyone who had died in the fight for human freedom. Tony Silva's name was inscribed at the top of the list, along with thousands of others who had given their lives so that humanity could be free. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of the hegemony was ending, and a new era of free species and independent worlds was beginning. Humanity had not just won its own freedom. It had shown the entire galaxy that freedom was possible for anyone brave enough to fight for it. The broadcast changed everything in a single day. Across Earth and the human colonies, people who had never questioned their peaceful lives suddenly saw the truth about the hegemony's methods. Riots broke out in dozens of cities as humans demanded answers from their alien overseers. Jake Morrison found himself leading a movement he had never intended to create. The communication center had become a fortress where rebels from across the city gathered to plan their next moves. Elena Rodriguez had disappeared during the chaos, and no one knew if she was hunting them or hiding from her own superiors. Lisa Hayes worked day and night to establish communication links with other rebel groups. We are getting reports from the colony worlds, she told Jake. Mars, Europa, the mining stations in the asteroid belt, they are all rising up. The hegemony never expected humans to coordinate resistance across such distances. Dr. Kane had made contact with the alien dissidents within the hegemony leadership. The Kryn are offering to help us, he announced during one of their planning meetings. They are a warrior species that successfully fought off hegemony control 30 years ago. They can provide weapons and tactical support. What do they want in return? Amy Collins asked suspiciously. An alliance. They believe that diversity makes the galaxy stronger, and they want humanity to join a confederation of free worlds rather than the hegemony's controlled society. The first Kryn ships arrived a week later, sleek black vessels that landed in secret locations around the city. The aliens inside were tall and muscular, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to see everything. Their leader introduced himself as Commander Vex. Humans fight with more spirit than we expected, Vex told Jake during their first meeting. The hegemony told us your species was weak and needed protection, but they were wrong. You are warriors who forgot how to fight. The Kryn brought weapons that humans had not seen for centuries, devices that could punch through hegemony shields and armor. They also brought news that was both encouraging and terrifying. The Hegemony Council is divided, Commander Vex explained. Some want to crush the human rebellion immediately, others want to negotiate. But all of them are afraid that other species under their control will follow your example. If humanity wins its freedom, the entire hegemony system could collapse. Jake knew that meant the aliens would eventually use extreme force to stop the rebellion. They could not afford to let humans inspire other worlds to revolt. The battle for New Angeles began 3 days later. Hegemony forces surrounded the city while their ships blocked all routes of escape. The peaceful blue-skinned Zeltharians had been replaced by other alien species, ones more willing to use violence against rebellious subjects. Elena Rodriguez appeared at the communication center just as the attack started. She was alone and looked like she had not slept in days. Jake met her at the entrance with his weapon ready. I am not here to fight you, Elena said, raising her hands. I am here to help. Why should we trust you? Because I saw the recordings. You broadcast. I saw what they did to Tony Silva and thousands of others. I spent my whole life believing the hegemony was saving us, but they were destroying us instead. Elena brought with her detailed plans of hegemony military positions and information about their weapon systems. She also brought terrible news about Tony Silva. They could not break him, she said quietly. Even after days of conditioning, he still remembered who he was and what he was fighting for. So they decided to execute him as an example to other potential rebels. The news of Tony's death spread through the resistance like fire. The man who had risked everything to expose the truth had paid the ultimate price for human freedom. His sacrifice made the remaining rebels more determined than ever to see the fight through to the end. Lisa Hayes led the defense of the communication center while Jake organized strike teams to hit hegemony positions throughout the city. The Kryn weapons proved effective against alien technology, but the cost in human lives was enormous. Streets that had been peaceful for centuries were now filled with the sounds of battle. Amy Collins coordinated with rebel groups on other worlds, helping them target key hegemony installations while the aliens were focused on Earth. The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had expected, but so was the hegemony's violent response. Dr. Kane worked to preserve as much human knowledge as possible, knowing that the libraries and data centers would be primary targets for hegemony bombers. Whatever happens to us, he told Jake, future humans must remember what we discovered here. The turning point came when Elena Rodriguez led a team to rescue prisoners from the processing facilities around the city. Among the freed humans were scientists, artists, and engineers who had been scheduled for personality modification. These people still remembered the old human ways of thinking and creating. We need to get off this planet, one of the rescued scientists told Jake. The hegemony will eventually destroy Earth rather than let us inspire other species to rebel. But if some of us can escape to free space, we can preserve human independence even if the homeworld falls. Commander Vex agreed to help evacuate as many humans as possible to Kryn territory. But the ships could only carry a few thousand people. And there were millions who would be left behind to face hegemony retaliation. Jake stood on the roof of the communication center, looking out at the city where he had been born and raised. Fires burned in the distance where the fighting continued, and alien ships moved across the sky like metal vultures. He had started this revolution to free humanity from alien control, but the price was higher than he had ever imagined. Elena Rodriguez joined him on the roof. Do you regret what we have done? She asked. Jake thought about Tony Silva's sacrifice, about the children in the processing facilities, about all the humans who had lived and died without ever knowing they had the right to choose their own destiny. No, he said finally. Even if we lose everything, at least we proved that humans still have the courage to fight for what we believe in. Below them, the battle for human freedom continued into the night. Elena Rodriguez stood in the observation room watching Tony Silva undergo the rehabilitation process. The man on the table had been one of the most dangerous rebels they had captured in months, someone who had actively worked to undermine the peace and stability the hegemony provided. The Zeltharian technician looked up from his instruments. The subject shows unusual resistance to the conditioning protocols. His neural patterns suggest genetic variations that make him less responsive to standard treatment. How long until the process is complete? Elena asked. Perhaps another day. We are having to be more careful with this one. Too much force could damage his brain permanently, and the hegemony prefers to preserve human life whenever possible. Elena nodded, but something about the scene bothered her. Tony Silva's eyes were still aware, still defiant, even as the machines worked to erase everything that made him who he was. She had overseen hundreds of these procedures, but she had never really looked at the faces of the subjects before. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was planning the most dangerous mission of his life. The resistance had grown to over 50 members, but they would need every person for the assault on the communication center. Lisa Hayes had studied the building's security systems and found weak points they could exploit. The main transmitter is on the top floor, she explained to the group. If we can reach it and hold the position for just 10 minutes, we can broadcast Tony's recordings to the entire city. But the building is protected by automated defenses and a full squad of compliance division officers. Dr. Kane had been working on something else. I made contact with someone inside the hegemony administration. There are aliens who disagree with the current policies toward humanity. They believe that suppressing our natural development weakens the entire Confederation. Can we trust them? Amy Collins asked. I think so. They have provided us with information about hegemony military movements and security protocols. But they cannot help us directly without risking their own positions. Jake divided the resistance into 3 teams. Lisa would lead a group to disable the building's defenses. Amy would coordinate communications and provide technical support, and Jake would take the assault team directly to the transmitter. Dr. Kane would remain at the safe house to broadcast the signal. Once they secured the equipment, the attack began at dawn. Lisa's team moved through maintenance tunnels to reach the power systems that controlled the building's security grid. They had practiced this operation dozens of times in abandoned buildings around the city, but they knew the real thing would be much more difficult. Jake's team approached the communication center from 3 different directions, using stolen compliance division uniforms to get past the outer perimeter. The plan was working until they reached the main lobby and found Elena Rodriguez waiting for them with a full squad of officers. Jake Morrison, Elena said calmly, I have been expecting you. The firefight that followed was unlike anything that had happened in New Angeles for over a century. Humans were shooting at other humans while alien observers watched in horror from their protected positions. The peaceful city that the hegemony had created was being torn apart by the very species they had tried so hard to protect. Elena found herself face to face with Jake in the stairwell leading to the upper floors. Both of them had their weapons drawn, but neither fired immediately. You are destroying everything we have built here, Elena said. The hegemony gave us peace, prosperity, safety. Why do you want to throw that away? Because it is not real, Jake replied. We are living in a cage, Elena, a beautiful, comfortable cage, but still a cage. Humans were meant to be free, even if freedom means making mistakes. Freedom means chaos. Freedom means war and suffering and death. The old humans nearly destroyed themselves before the hegemony arrived. Maybe that was our choice to make. For a moment, Elena hesitated. Something in Jake's words reminded her of feelings she had buried long ago, dreams of exploration and adventure that she had been taught to forget. But then her training took over and she raised her weapon. The shot never came. Lisa Hayes had succeeded in disabling the building's power systems, plunging everything into darkness. In the confusion, Jake's team reached the transmitter room and began setting up the broadcast equipment. Amy Collins was in the building's communication center. working frantically to override the security protocols that would prevent their signal from reaching the city. Her fingers moved over the controls with desperate speed as she heard gunfire echoing through the corridors below. 10 seconds to transmission, she called out over the radio. Jake looked out the window at the city spread below them. In a few moments, millions of people would see the truth about what the hegemony had been doing to them. Some would refuse to believe it, others would be too afraid to act. But some would understand and join the fight for human freedom. The broadcast began with the recordings from the processing facility. Images of humans being modified against their, children having their personalities erased, the systematic destruction of everything that made humanity unique. The signal reached every screen in New Angeles, and from there it spread to other cities and other worlds where humans lived under hegemony control. Elena Rodriguez was still in the stairwell when the broadcast started. She could hear the sounds coming from screens throughout the building, voices of the technicians she had trusted, images of procedures she had never questioned. For the first time in her adult life, she began to understand what the resistance was really fighting against. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Ships appeared in the sky above New Angeles, ready to bomb the communication center and end the rebellion before it could spread. But they hesitated, unwilling to destroy the very humans they claimed to be protecting. In that moment of hesitation, Jake Morrison knew that the revolution had begun and there would be no turning back for humanity ever again. The resistance grew slowly over the following months. Jake used his position in the Colonial Defense Force to identify other officers who showed signs of independent thinking. Amy Collins recruited people from her workplace who had noticed strange gaps in the computer systems. Dr. Kane found historians and teachers who remembered asking questions that were never answered. Their meeting place changed every week. Sometimes they gathered in abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city, other times in empty warehouses on the outskirts of town. Each new member brought valuable information about the hegemony's operations. Lisa Hayes made the most disturbing discovery. While working on maintenance systems, she had found hidden pathways that led to facilities not shown on any official maps. There are laboratories under the city, she told the group during one of their meetings. Places where they process humans who have been selected for rehabilitation. How many people are we talking about? Jake asked. Hundreds every month, Lisa replied, maybe thousands. They take people who show signs of what they call antisocial behavior. Curiosity, creativity, anger, anything that suggests the old human. Nature is still strong. Tony Silva had been watching the transport schedules. I tracked the vehicles that take people to these facilities. Most of them never come back. The ones who do return are different, like their personalities have been completely replaced. Dr. Kane spread out a hand-drawn map on the table. I found the location of the main processing center. It is disguised as a medical research facility about 20 miles outside the city. If we could get inside and document what they are doing, there we might be able to wake up more humans to the truth. That would be extremely dangerous, Amy warned. The security around these places is handled by the Compliance Division. Elena Rodriguez herself oversees some of these operations. Jake had been thinking about Elena Rodriguez ever since that day when Amy first told him about the files. The commander was human, but she seemed to believe completely in the hegemony's mission. Either she did not know the truth about what was happening, or she had been so thoroughly conditioned that she could not see it anymore. We need proof, Jake said. Something that cannot be denied or explained away? If we can show people what is really happening in these facilities, some of them might start to question everything else they have been told. Lisa Hayes volunteered to lead the mission to infiltrate the processing center. Her knowledge of security systems and maintenance tunnels made her the best choice for getting inside undetected. Jake insisted on going with her, along with Tony Silva and 2 new recruits. They had found in the past month. The facility looked innocent enough from the outside. Clean white buildings surrounded by gardens and peaceful walking paths. Signs identified it as the Henderson Medical Research Institute, dedicated to improving human health and well-being. But Lisa led them through underground passages that revealed a different truth. Through reinforced windows, they could see humans lying on medical tables while alien technicians worked on their heads with strange devices. The people on the tables were not moving, but their eyes were open and aware. Jake recognized one of them as a man who had been arrested for trying to organize a group to study old human literature. "They are rewriting their brains," Lisa whispered. "Removing memories, changing thought patterns, installing new personalities that fit what the hegemony wants." In another room, they saw children who could not have been more than 10 years old undergoing the same procedures. These were the ones identified early as having too much of the old human spirit, the ones who asked too many questions or showed too much independence. Tony Silva was recording everything with a small camera they had built from salvaged parts. "This is enough evidence to wake up half the city," he said quietly, but as they prepared to leave, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Security lights flashed red, and they could hear the sound of running footsteps in the corridors. Above them, "Someone knows we are here," Jake said, drawing his weapon. "We need to move now." They made it halfway back through the underground tunnels before the Compliance Division officers found them. The firefight was brief but intense. Tony Silva held off the pursuers while the others escaped, but he was captured before he could follow them out. Back at their safe house, the survivors watched the recordings Tony had made. The evidence was clear and undeniable, but it had cost them one of their best people. Jake felt responsible for Tony's capture, knowing that his friend was probably undergoing the same brain modification they had witnessed. "We cannot let his sacrifice be meaningless," Dr. Kane said. "We have to use this evidence to show people the truth." Amy Collins had an idea. "The city's communication system has emergency broadcast capabilities. If we could access the main transmitter, we could send these recordings to every screen in New Angeles. Millions of people would see what the hegemony is really doing." "The transmitter is heavily guarded," Lisa pointed out. "And after tonight, they will be watching for us everywhere." Jake looked around at the faces of his fellow rebels. They were scared but determined, ordinary humans who had discovered something extraordinary about themselves. They had found the courage to fight for their freedom, even when that fight seemed impossible to win. "Then we make this count," Jake said. "We gather everyone we can trust, we plan this carefully, and we show the world what humanity used to be before the hegemony taught us to be afraid of ourselves." Outside their hiding place, the city slept peacefully under alien protection. But in the darkness, humans were beginning to remember what it meant to be truly alive, and that memory was more dangerous to the hegemony than any weapon ever created. 3 weeks passed before Amy Collins contacted Jake again. She found him during his lunch break at a small cafe near the Central Plaza. The place was quiet, like most public spaces in the city, with people eating their meals in peaceful silence. "I need to show you something," Amy whispered as she sat across from him. "But not here. Meet me tonight at the old library on 5th Street, the building they closed down last year." Jake wanted to ask questions, but Amy was already leaving. He watched her walk away, moving quickly but trying not to draw attention. Something had changed about her in the past few weeks. She looked thinner, more alert, like a person who had not been sleeping well. That evening, Jake found himself standing in front of the abandoned library. The building was dark and empty, with boards covering most of the windows. He had never questioned why the hegemony had closed it down, but now he wondered what had been inside that they did not want people to see. Amy was waiting for him in the shadows near a side door. "I found a way inside," she said. "There are others who want to meet you." The door opened into a basement room lit by small electric lights. 3 people sat around an old wooden table covered with papers and books. Jake recognized one of them immediately, Dr. Richard Kane, a man who had worked in the city archives before being transferred to a different job 6 months ago. "Jake Morrison," Dr. Kane said, standing to shake his hand. "Amy told us about your conversation. We have been hoping to find people like you, people who are starting to ask the right questions." The other 2 introduced themselves as Lisa Hayes, an engineer who worked on city maintenance systems, and Tony Silva, a former security officer who had been demoted after asking too many questions about his assignments. "What is this place?" Jake asked, looking around at the books and papers scattered everywhere. "This is what remains of human knowledge," Dr. Kane explained. "Before the hegemony closed the library, I managed to save some of the old books and records. What I found changed everything I believed about our history." Lisa Hayes opened a thick book and showed Jake pages filled with pictures and drawings. "Look at these images from before the hegemony arrived. Humans built machines that could travel faster than light, created art that expressed deep emotions, wrote stories about adventure and conflict and love. We were inventors, explorers, dreamers. But we were also violent and destructive," Jake said, repeating what he had learned in school. "The hegemony saved us from ourselves." Tony Silva laughed. But there was no humor in the sound. "That is what they want us to believe, but look at this." He showed Jake a document written in an old style. "This is a medical report from 50 years ago. It talks about genetic modifications being performed on human children, changes designed to make them more cooperative and less aggressive." Jake felt his stomach turn cold. "Genetic modifications? They have been changing us," Amy said quietly. "Generation by generation, making us more like what they think we should be. More peaceful, more obedient, less curious about the world around." "Yes," Dr. Kane pulled out another set of papers. "I found records of human inventions that were taken by the hegemony and given to other species in their confederation. Our ideas, our discoveries, our creativity, all stolen and used by others while we were told we were too primitive to understand such things." "This cannot be true," Jake said, but even as he spoke the words, he felt doubt growing inside him. "If this is real, why has no one spoken about it before?" "Because most people cannot see it anymore," Lisa explained. "The genetic changes, the education system, the constant message that questioning authority leads to unhappiness. It all works together to keep humans quiet and content. But some of us are different. Some of us still have the old human spirit that refuses to be completely erased." Tony Silva leaned forward. "Jake, you are in the Colonial Defense Force. You see things that regular citizens do not see. Have you ever wondered what happens to people who cause problems? Where do they go when they are taken away for rehabilitation?" Jake thought about the protesters he had seen arrested last month, people who had been carrying signs asking for permission to explore space on their own. They had been taken to comfort facilities for treatment, but he had never seen any of them return to the city. "I assumed they were being helped," Jake said slowly. "They are being erased," Amy said. "Their memories, their personalities, everything that made them who they were, replaced with something more acceptable to the hegemony." Dr. Kane stood up and walked to a map hanging on the wall. "The hegemony controls 47 worlds where they have pacified aggressive species. Earth is just one of many. But on some worlds, the original inhabitants fought back and won their freedom. It can be done. What are you suggesting?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "We are suggesting that humans deserve the right to choose their own path," Lisa said. "Even if that path includes mistakes and conflict and pain. Freedom is worth more than safety, if safety means giving up everything that makes us human." Jake looked around the room at these four people who had risked everything to preserve the truth about humanity's past. He thought about Amy's shaking hands, about the quiet children in the park, about all the questions he had never been allowed to ask. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Tony Silva smiled, and for the first time Jake saw what a human smile used to look like before the hegemony taught them to be calm and controlled. "Help us find others like us. Help us learn the truth about what the hegemony is really doing, and when the time comes, help us fight for our freedom." Outside the abandoned library, the city continued its quiet existence, unaware that in a basement room, the first seeds of human rebellion were beginning to grow. Jake Morrison walked down the clean streets of New Angeles with his hand resting on his weapon. The morning sun reflected off the glass towers that reached into the sky like fingers touching the clouds. Everything was perfect here, just like it had been for the past 200 years since the hegemony came to Earth. The aliens had saved humanity from destroying itself. Or so everyone was told. he passed a group of children playing in a small park. They moved slowly and quietly, never raising their voices or fighting over toys. Jake remembered stories his grandfather told him about children from the old days, how they used to run and scream and cause trouble. These children seemed different, almost like small adults who had forgotten how to be young. The hegemony had given humanity everything they needed. Disease was gone, hunger was a word found only in old books, and war was something that happened long ago on distant worlds. The tall Zeltharian overseers walked among the humans with their blue skin and kind eyes, always ready to help, always watching to make sure everyone was safe and happy. Jake stopped at his usual morning post near the government building. His job was simple: keep the peace, help citizens with problems, and report anything unusual to his supervisors. He had been doing this work for 10 years, ever since he finished his education and was assigned to the Colonial Defense Force. The hegemony chose jobs for everyone based on their skills and what society needed most. A woman approached him, looking nervous. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and worried eyes. "Officer Morrison," she said quietly, "I need to report something strange." Jake turned to face her completely. "What can I help you with, Miss Collins?" Amy Collins looked around to make sure no one was listening. "I work in the data center downtown. Yesterday I found some files that I think I was not supposed to see. They were about human history, but not the history we learned in school. These files talked about things we used to build, inventions we made, art we created. But I have never heard of any of these things before." Jake felt something cold move through his chest. "What kind of things?" "Machines that could fly to other stars, music that made people feel strong emotions, stories about humans fighting for their freedom. The files said we used to be different, that we used to create amazing things on our own without help from anyone else. But that does not match what we know about the old days. We were told humans were violent and could not take care of themselves." Jake looked at Amy's face and saw something he did not often see in people anymore: curiosity mixed with fear. Most humans he knew were content with their lives, never asking questions about the past or wondering about things beyond their daily work. "Where are these files now?" he asked. "They disappeared from the system this morning. When I tried to access them again, it was like they never existed. But I remember what I read, Officer Morrison. I remember every word." Before Jake could respond, a tall figure approached them. Commander Elena Rodriguez of the Hegemony Compliance Division walked toward them with confident steps. She was human like them, but she had been chosen for special training when she was young. Her eyes were calm and her voice was always steady. "Is there a problem here?" Elena asked, looking between Jake and Amy. Miss Collins was reporting some concerns about her work. Jake said carefully. Elena smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "Amy Collins, you work in data management, correct? Sometimes old files can be confusing." The past was a difficult time for humanity, full of pain and conflict. It is better not to worry about such things. The hegemony helps us focus on the present and future, where we can all be happy and safe. Amy nodded quickly, but Jake could see her hands shaking slightly. "Yes, Commander Rodriguez. You are right. I must have misunderstood what I saw." "Good. Why don't you take the rest of the day off? Rest will help clear your mind." Elena's voice was kind, but there was something underneath that sounded like a warning. After Amy left, Elena turned to Jake. "Some people find it hard to accept the peace we have been given. They look for problems where none exist. It is important to help them understand that questioning the hegemony's wisdom only leads to unhappiness." Jake nodded, but Elena's words felt wrong in his mind. "Of course, Commander." As Elena walked away, Jake found himself thinking about what Amy had said. He had never questioned why humans seemed so different from the stories in old books. Why? No one ever seemed to want anything more than what they already had. For the first time in his life, Jake Morrison began to wonder if the peace they lived in was really peace at all, or something else entirely. That night, Jake lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Outside his window, the city hummed with quiet efficiency, but inside his mind, questions were growing like weeds in a perfect garden.